is lesson one, concept one. Obviously, everything has ecological tolerances. If the sun went supernova, everything on the Earth and the Earth itself would go beyond its tolerances and be destroyed. Yet, that same sun doing what it's doing and has been doing for a long time. The slight amount of variation that does occur there doesn't push the Earth beyond its tolerances to keep these ecosystems together that all life evolved in. So, how do we look at these limits and tolerances, and how do we use them to develop policy? We do it by understanding the concept of URI and steno. URI is a term for, it means wide tolerance. Steno means narrow tolerance. So back when I was in high school, I took a special summer school class on tidal marine biology, inshore marine biology, and we got to these tide pools and we would measure the temperature, the salinity, and the pH of the tide pools and then the open ocean every hour during the course of the day. As the tide came in, the tide went out. And this showed the difference between URI and steno very clearly. A creature that has a wide tolerance to temperature is a URI thermal creature. One that has a narrow tolerance to temperature change is stenothermal. Haline means salt, so a creature that can handle a wide change of salinity is URI haline. One that can handle only a narrow change is stenohaline. Same thing with pH. So, what's the difference between the tide pool creatures and the open ocean creatures? Well, out in the open ocean, as the sun makes its arc across the sky and as a particular area of water goes through the seasons, there's not a very wide change in the temperature of that water because the energy that's absorbed, the heat energy, is absorbed by such a large mass, the entire ocean. So the creatures that live in the top layer of the open ocean are stenothermal and stenohaline, and the same thing with pH. You put them in a tide pool, however, which is where URI thermal and URI haline and wide pH tolerant creatures live, and the changes are beyond the tolerance of those fish to survive. They die. Why does this happen? Well, think about the tide pools. When the tide's in, the water, the pH, and the salinity are the same in them as it is in the open ocean, pretty much. The tide goes out, the water drains away, and then it sits in these pools, which are much smaller bodies of water than the entire ocean. They're a matter of square feet, or cubic feet. And so, as the sun makes its arc across the sky, water evaporates. That does two things. It means that the heat that goes into that water is absorbed by a smaller amount of water, and so it becomes hotter. And it makes the water saltier because the portion of water to salt has changed. There's less water, making it more salty. So it keeps getting more and more salty and warmer until the tide comes back in. So that's the variation that creatures that live in tide pools have to go through, and that's the amount of tolerance they develop as they evolve. All of these things develop with evolution. The creatures that were in tide pools that couldn't handle it, they died off a long time ago. So, what does this have to do with human beings? Well, if we start looking at ourselves the same way, in a natural way, an anthropological way, an ecological way, we too evolved, and our tolerances, both physical, culturally, psychologically, have their tolerances, they have their limits. It's not about putting them in the category of URI or steno, but it shows that we do have very specific tolerances, even if we can't define them. For example, if the atmosphere were 150 degrees, we'd all be dead. We all know that. If it was 25 degrees below zero, we'd all be dead. Well, our tolerances are somewhere in between, and we've been able to expand them because we have ways of heating ourselves external to food. We have clothing, we have shelters of all kinds, we have fuels that we can burn. So that allows us to take those things to go into these areas beyond, a pre-technological human's tolerances and be able to tolerate them. But there are limits, and there are limits to how much CO2 can go into the atmosphere without destabilizing the world's climate systems, and destabilizing them enough that we start to lose all of our growing seasons, entire crops dying off, that rainforests are dried up just enough that they start to all light on fire. There are points where these things happen. So what we have to do as activists, as our politicians have to do this, as citizens, we have to teach this to our kids, is we have to ask the question, what are these tolerances? And what do they tell us about how much we have to change ourselves and our society? And in what ways? And in what time frame? So how much do we have to change, and how much time do we have to do it? That is the first question we have to ask for determining all other policies in our society. The economics has to be built around making sure that we do not go beyond these tolerances. Absolutely, because these are the tolerances that keep the spaceship together enough that it sustains human life in outer space. And if you destroy that, puncture a hole in the space station or the space shuttle, it blows up. That's beyond the tolerance. Well, we can do similar kinds of things by altering climate systems and changing sea levels and destroying entire crops and entire nations. So we have to look at, are we doing this now? How close to it are we? And if we're real close, we have to stop doing those things immediately. And because we must do those things, we have to cushion the shock in our society. The people who are most affected by stopping that have to also feel secure and have to be brought through this with support and a sense of security and a sense that they aren't losing everything and going crazy. We have to do this with compassion and a national and international spirit of solidarity. We have to do it by encouraging a spirit of compassion and wanting to work together in a team to make it better for all of us and to keep all the things we love together, all the species, all the places, all of our freedoms, and all of the things that enrich our lives. So that's what it's all about. And so we have to shift our politics now to something that is actually dealing with things on these levels. And that's what my campaign's about. And no one else's campaign is about that, at least right now. Which is why I'm the person who should be elected in the 2nd District. There's no one else who's even close. Tax the rich now. New, green America. And every other country. So let's talk about wellness. Psychological tolerances. Those things developed in nature too. For example, since we were tribal and clan creatures, our psyches needed to have that kind of connection with that kind of number of people in that kind of an intimate way for us to feel in balance. And there are many, many subtle things like that that you can see exemplified when you look at other primates in the zoo. I would propose that we humans are as screwed up and out of touch with reality and as crazed out of our minds compared to tribal peoples, pre-industrial peoples, as any monkey is in the zoo compared to that same monkey or ape in the wild. You cut the creature off from the things that it's been a part of, its ancestors been a part of for hundreds of thousands, millions of years, and they are beyond their tolerances. So that's why everybody's so crazy, why everybody's doing things against their own self-interest. They're just completely whacked out of balance on all these different levels. So, what do we do about that? Herbert Marcuse gave several lectures at my college before he died, where he was a professor emeritus, about his work studying the intersection of Freud's analysis of the human psyche and Marx's analysis of society. He was basically looking for answers to the questions, how does society mess with the psyche? And of course, how does the psyche create balance by creating what kind of society around it? So he was part of something called the Frankfurt School with people like Erich Fromm, and this lecture was very interesting. Again, going back to an anthropological way of looking at it, the question is, well, what is a healthy human being? I mean, what is it like? How do you categorize it? What qualities does it have? And he divided people into two groups. Emancipatory is the natural state. It's comes from what he calls eros. It's the erotic, connecting. We are all in it. We're all one, life-loving, in tune with the rhythms of nature, helpful, caring, compassionate. Those are the natural tendencies of humans, because naturally, evolution would reinforce those behaviors to keep tribes together. If a tribe is together, by definition, there has to be a certain level of connection and cooperation. So those behaviors over the almost 200,000 years that our species has existed have become essential to us staying within our psychological tolerances. So naturally, putting people in jail and taking those people away from their families completely mess up both the people in jail and the people who are out of jail, who love them and who need them. They're both thrown into states of, well, they're sort of figuratively put in a situation like being put in a zoo. They're domesticated. They're taken away from their connection, and therefore away from the lessons that those connections would teach them, so that they would do the things that would be sensible, that would be in balance, and that would be supportive of a culture of wellness and connection and community. So, that is the emancipatory nature of human beings, the opposite of original sin. Original sin is the exact opposite of reality in terms of what true human nature is. So what happens when you put that person in a socially engineered, mechanized social structure? What happens when you make people work 9 to 5? What happens when you put kids in school in which they're taught one thing for an hour, have 5 minutes break to go learn something completely different another hour, where they don't get up or go to sleep any differently depending upon what season it is, where everything is temperature controlled and humidity controlled, so that the summers and winters are almost the same experience for most of the hours of anybody's life as they go through the year. These things all disconnect people from what they would experience living in connection with the rest of nature, the rest of the earth. And so what we need to do is try to shape society so that people have fewer and fewer of these social structures messing with them. Because what happens is, when you do this to a person, they start to spring painful leaks, psychological leaks, sometimes physical pain. Sometimes they develop compulsions, they get fat, they watch too much TV, they don't exercise, they don't hang out with people anymore, they just stay with their family, with a remote control, home theaters, widescreen TVs. Computer games, computers, internet. Not outside. Not with other species. controlling what species you're with, controlling what your immediate environment looks like, not being put in a natural environment that tells you certain things. So your orientation changes. Your orientation changes to being what Marcuse called compensatory. Your orientation becomes not towards releasing all of this joyous, connecting, loving energy, but towards stopping these leaks, these pains. It's an orientation of defense, of stopping pain. I've got to stop this pain, that pain. I'm crazy over here, I hurt over here, I'm eating crappy food, so I'm internally out of balance there. I'm not like I should be because I'm watching what I should be on TV and I'm not like that, so how should I be? I'm confused. All of these things are like little leaks in a hose, little holes, little pinprick holes that sprout little bursts of water. And so what happens is, it's like putting your hand on the end of the hose and you just build up pressure. And you have all these leaks and you go through your whole life just trying to find different ways of alleviating your suffering, alleviating these various pains. And you have so many of them that you just kind of shift from one to another. And you are offered solutions in the culture around you in the form of commercial solutions. Instead of having healers, food producers, spiritual people in your tribal community telling you things that allow you to become in balance, you're taught things because they will make someone money. You're given options that require you to stay in the commercial game, to make money, to buy solutions to your problem, to buy the salves that will alleviate your suffering. So we have to get people into a situation where those sufferings stop enough that their natural emancipatory energy can come back through them. It's very zen actually, be here now. Well, when you're emancipatory, you are like living the hose of water that is bursting through you out into the world. You are in the moment by definition, like you're in the moment when the hose is splashing water. That's a wild human. That's a self-actualized human being. It's a person who controls their destiny, but does it in concert with, and easily in concert with the vast majority of the people that one encounters in their life and in their community. And they don't have too many things to think about. There's a book called Western Civilization in Biological Perspective by either an Australian or New Zealander named Stephen Boyden. It has a chart in there that was made from studying tribal peoples that basically was a list of qualities that were conducive to well-being in human beings. And I read this as qualities that allow a person to live their emancipatory self. So if you look at this list and you see things you're not doing, you understand a way that you have a leak, a pain that you are trying to stop. And if you can change that, you can stop trying to plug that leak. And that's one less pain you have to deal with. And if you stop enough of those, you can tune in much, much more with each one to this emancipatory way. You can start to intentionally do things that encourage your emancipatory way, I think. And kind of compassionate work for others is a way of releasing that. So if you feel blocked up by your life, go out and volunteer. Do something that's really helpful to someone. Then they will send back love to you, and that will help you out a little bit at least as a release for a while from the craziness that you're being forced to live in. And so it gives you a good little break instead of a smoke break or drink. A little love break, like giving to others, like being connected. That's the good thing to do. You basically try to develop more connection to generations, to the different sexes, different people who have varying ideas about things, about reality, politics, about anything. Just kind of get connected to those folks and have it become natural. Have it be something that is whole to you, not something that's strange or alien or frightening to you. So this list have things like being able to go to sleep when you want to, get up when you want to. That's conducive to well-being. So that's something you have to get to go to school, go to work. You're being screwed up. It's throwing you off.
Another thing is working in small groups on medium time frame projects that have a pretty good likelihood of success. That's kind of interesting. Who would have thought that that was essential for human beings?
Yeah, I can see that. Makes sense to me. You know, people do it all the time. You have a church fundraiser or the KMUD fund drive. You have these things that you kind of come together around for a few weeks or a few months. And it's very connecting. And kind of that groove, that glow of connectivity, especially with radio fund drives, kind of tends to go out and it's contagious. And it kind of feel people having more of a giving, connecting kind of energy. So we can create these kinds of connection zones, liberation zones. And that's something anybody can do regardless of politics. Just kind of create this space in larger and larger areas around you and bring more and more people into that. And just expand it outward, this sort of wellness that comes from reconnecting to eros, from being here now and from being once again connected to your fellow humans, your tribal cohorts, your clan members, and your fellow species, and your ecosystem where you live. Bioregionalism, which I think should be the organizing principle
For how we make this change is a great way for people to get reconnected because they have to learn about the species, the ecosystems, the soil, the climate, all of this stuff in order to come up with an economic plan that they can even remotely claim can lead to sustainability within that ecosystem. So that's a way of re-ecologizing the psyches of masses of people all over the place. Everyone everywhere has to do this assessment where they live, whether it's Kansas, Northern California, New York City, or the Everglades. So there are ways that we can make ourselves well, individually and collectively, ways that we can suddenly find ourselves acting more sanely in our political activities, in terms of what we put into our heads from watching TV to what we read, to the kinds of things we talk about, the kinds of ways we use language and the subject we talk about when we talk about religion and spirituality. And of course, we'll have more awareness of the things that we just kind of put into our shadow self, the things that we'd rather not look at and hope somebody else takes care of, like the homeless people and their crap, literally. Just take away the porta potty, take away the bathroom, and these people will go away, I think. Totally insane?
No, they'll just take a crap in front of your business. That's madness. That's disconnection. That is not pursuing wellness. That's pursuing me over everything else. And in a spaceship, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Because who you ignore can blow up the spaceship if you don't get along with them. No, it's all about wellness and connecting. It's all about constructing what we want pragmatically that we can see will actually solve the problems. Because we've actually looked at the problems and have a really good assessment of what they are and are perpetuating all these lies, all this bullshit that the whole right wing is spewing, the climate deniers and the rest of them, the name callers. Those people just have to wither off and die because everyone ignores them because they're so tuned in to coming together and the glow of all this emancipatory energy that just grows and grows and grows like a fire. Warm everybody up that comes near it. That's the way to go. And we can redirect our society that way in many, many ways. We can do it in our own lives, we can do it in how we talk, and I want to do it in the political realm. We can demand it, we can constantly keep telling the same thing over and over again to our leaders, and we constantly implement what matters to us. We influence things in the direction we want them to go. We just keep pushing where it should go, hold our focus on what needs to be done, and on staying connected, and on staying well. That's how you make change. That's how you bring the hoop together. That's how you have individual wellness. That's how you have societies that make more sense. And therefore, that's how you have humans that live in balance with their ecosystems.
Problem solved. Problem solved.
Problem solved. Problem solved. Problem solved.
Problem solved. Problem solved. Problem solved. Problem solved. Problem solved.